This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Q&A, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get into. So we're going to start with T. Roberts, who says, that ain't T. Roberts. Let me get the T. Roberts right here. My bad, y'all. T. Roberts says, how likely is it that the Browns move on from Deshaun, but continue to restructure his contract? So it's basically $40 million on the cap for the next 5 years compared to 72 over the next 2. Yeah, the Browns, it's going to be interesting to see how they have to handle this situation, right? If they go the draft route, they have a little bit of flexibility with how they can move Deshaun's stuff around. If they decide to kind of basically make Deshaun inactive for the next year and a half, they have that option there as well. It's going to be awkward, no doubt. Like either Deshaun's going to be like the highest paid backup or the highest paid inactive eligible player or emergency quarterback in the league, but it's just going to be what it is. Like, I think we're just going to function like he's not on the team while also using him as a roster spot, similar to how it happened at the end of his Houston run. More than likely, like if he cooperates, you can get that contract restructured and moved down and spread out, and that'd be good for you, but he will probably be like your emergency quarterback or backup if that's the case. And if he does not want to cooperate, then it's just going to be really awkward for a couple of years until his contract expires. But yeah, they'll have multiple different ways to try to figure it out. That's definitely an option. I think that's the option that they would prefer. It's the more civilized option of all of them. Billy with the question here says, at what point are we going to see more of DTR? We truly need to evaluate this guy if we're thinking of taking a quarterback in the draft, or are we going to get someone like Cousins and float another season? I think getting a Cousins could be something that they could consider. You can get Kirk Cousins. You can do exactly what the Atlanta Falcons did, acquire Kirk Cousins, put somebody behind him, play Kirk Cousins for a year, and then move Kirk Cousins afterwards to a buyer and start the rookie, right? That's an option that you have on the table. As far as DTR goes, we got to be real about what DTR was. He's a 5th round pick, and 5th round picks, like, yeah, every once in a while you get a Brock Purdy or a Dak Prescott, who I believe was a 4th round pick, or Tom Brady, who steps in and starts. But 5th round picks in general, even if they play quarterback, they're not going to get a bunch of games to evaluate to see if they can start, because they're really just supposed to be backup players. So I don't think DTR, in evaluating DTR, is going to prohibit you from taking a quarterback in the 1st round this year if you really like one. I just think that's how that one goes for DTR. It might be unfair, but it is how it goes, as they all say. Orange Mint says, how does this draft outlook change if Cedric Tillman keeps playing this good? Do we still go for Tetro in the 1st round? Also, is it possible we find a free agent replacement for Jack Conklin? It seems a lot like a lot of these tackle prospects are guard at the next level. Here's how I look at the draft. I don't think the draft is where you want to go searching for wide receivers, because right now, if you look at that room, it's super young. And what I think that room needs is a veteran, right? You shipped out Amari Cooper. I think in free agency, you'll try to bring in a veteran. And if not in free agency, you might do it via a trade with somebody. Somebody might become available. You'll move for them. And that's how you get a veteran in there. But I think with wide receiver this offseason, they're going to be looking at a veteran, right? Because that room needs a veteran presence. Not a super old guy, but somebody who's been in the league more than just a couple of years, because I think Jerry Jeudy's the most senior player on that in that wide receiver room. So that's not something you want to continue to have going on. As far as the offensive tackle stuff goes, well, if DeJuan can play left tackle, and it's yet to be seen yet, he's only played 2 games, but if DeJuan can play left tackle, and you can hang on to Jack Conklin and maybe sign a veteran swing tackle to back up both of them, then you would hold there and really invest in the interior offensive line in this year's draft. I don't see a ton of tackle prospects that feel like they would be worth it in this year's draft, but I do see a lot of interior prospects that I do think would be worth it. So I think that's where the Browns would be best to spend those resources in the draft, in my opinion. UK Browns fans hit me with the question here. Says, should the Browns be favored to beat the Saints this Sunday? It's crazy to think they haven't won in the Superdome since 2010. I don't know how often the Browns have played in the Superdome since 2010. I know they had the one game where Antonio Callaway caught that touchdown, but I think Zayma Gonzalez missed the extra point to tie the game or put the Browns ahead. And that was in the Superdome. And I have to imagine between 2010 and now, that might have been one, or maybe there might have played like 2 games in the Superdome since. So it's not that crazy when you actually think about it. I don't know how often the Browns play in the Superdome, but I don't think it's even close to common occurrence because of their placement in the NFC. And then every time you play the NFC, like you only play in the Superdome every like 8 years or something like that, something crazy like that. So that's not the craziest thing to think about, but yeah, I think the Browns should be able to beat the Saints, but the Browns have not been able to do a lot of things this season that you think they should be able to. So, they're not a sure bet no matter what until they start proving that they can be a sure bet throughout the rest of the season. So that's really where I'm at with them. I hope they can win. Jarrett says, why has David Njoku not been the same this year? I think this has a lot to do with the fact that the Browns for so long at the beginning of the season failed to stretch the field vertically. I think in the 2 games with Jameis, you've seen a little bit more production from David Njoku, but David Njoku thrived when teams would play off the line of scrimmage and really be worried about things going over top of them. You could throw it underneath to David. He could be a bull in the china shop and kind of take advantage there. Right now, because teams are so condensed on the line of scrimmage, especially when Deshaun was the quarterback, the most you can get with David was like a curl over the ball or a ball route or something like that for 5 or 6, 7 yards with not that much opportunity to run after catch. So I think he's been a victim of how defenses have been playing the Browns because the Browns quarterbacks for the first 7 weeks of the season didn't provide any kind of downfield vertical threat. Now with Jameis in there, even though Jameis is going to throw more interceptions than any of the other quarterbacks on the Browns roster, at least you have some kind of vertical threat there when it comes to the quarterback actually throwing deep, and I think that'll open up David Njoku quite a bit in the second half of the season. Mo Simmons says, out of all the bubble guys, Wills, Teller, Newsom, etc., who do you want to keep for next year and why? If you're adding Conklin, I think Conklin's probably the guy who's leading the clubhouse to stay. They don't seem to be able to find the trade value that they want out of Greg Newsom to make it happen. So I don't think Greg Newsom is going to go anywhere. Who else did you have listed there? Wyatt Teller, I don't think they're going to be in a rush to get off Wyatt Teller, right? If they draft a guard this year, it's probably going to be a couple of years until not a couple of years, but at least a year until you're ready to play him. You're probably going to have to replace Joe Bitonio first, so you probably don't want to be in a situation where you're replacing both your starting guards. So I would imagine they replace Joel at the end of this year if Joel retires, and then replace Wyatt the year after that with somebody that they draft in this year's class, and then so on and so forth, right? So I think, that's how they'll go about it. Jed Wills, he's probably gone, and I think that's best for everybody involved, including Jed Wills himself. Christopher Middlebrook says, if Winston doesn't work out, what is the short-term plan at quarterback? The free agent market at the QB is usually weak in the draft. It's a crapshoot. Can't have young QBs trying to figure things out on a vet-led team trying to win. I'm concerned this team is in a rock and a hard place to be in contention. This is exactly like kind of the conundrum that the Browns find themselves in, right? Because if they do draft a rookie, I do think you're right. They're too good of a team to ask a rookie to jump into and lead, right? Because this team has like 30-year-olds on it in their prime, guys who are at the best at their position group. They're not going to come in and listen to a 22-year-old try to lead them, right? So it's not a environment that's ripe for rallying around like a super young quarterback. You would want that quarterback kind of Big Ben early in his career style to be able to be worked in slowly. That being said, it's going to be tough to make that happen, right? Like Kirk Cousins is the one name that people can throw out there. Maybe some other quarterback becomes available during the offseason or during this season. You can, but other than that, you're looking at, the usual suspects: Joe Flacco, Jacoby Brissett, Jameis Winston, that range of quarterbacks. And yeah, if you're trying to contend, that's not necessarily the quarterback you want to roll into the season starting for a whole year. So it's going to put a lot of pressure on whoever they draft, if they draft somebody in this year's class. So yeah, I agree with you. Like that's the rock and the hard place that they're at, and that's what they're going to have to figure out. Nathaniel says, Q, I've heard you say that Curtis Work can layer the ball, and that's important in Kevin's offense. Yes. Can you give us some info on what you like about him as a prospect and what makes you nervous about him as a prospect? All right, yeah, it's real simple with Curtis Work. Curtis Work is the best quarterback in college at doing exactly what Kevin Stefanski wants you to do, right? He plays a very similar system in Indiana and at OU that he would need to play for the Cleveland Browns, and he does that at a very high level for a college football player. The problem is that also Curtis Work is 24, which means that he has a built-in age advantage over his competition in college. And a lot of times, like we saw this with Kenny Pickett, when a quarterback is just much older than his competition, it's a lot easier for that quarterback to dominate that competition because they're just more advanced. But then they go to the NFL and you don't have that same type of advantage, and it doesn't look the same there, right? So it could be that he's just an old quarterback playing against young competition and he's dominating because of that. And that's what kind of concerns me, right? If Curtis Work were doing this and he were like 21, he'd be a first round pick, but him being 24 makes you wonder, like, oh, is he just more advanced than these guys? And it's making him look a lot better of a prospect than he actually is, which could be the case and is the case with a lot of guys. It's why I don't think Curtis Work is a first round prospect, but I wouldn't mind Curtis Work in the third round because at that point, it's worth the flyer. Booth 905 says, which side of the ball should we concentrate on more in this upcoming draft, offense or defense? No doubt in my mind, offense is where you should focus on. Jalen Hall says, will they turn it around? Is this what we got to look forward to for the next few years? I'll say this. In pro sports, these two things are constants. You're never as good as you think you are when you're winning, and you're never as bad as you think you are when you're losing, right? That is always true. Whenever you look at a team, if you look at like a team that's struggling and you're about to play them, they're never as bad as you think they're going to be, right? Oh, they're 1-7. They're never as bad as you think they're going to be, right? The Browns are not as bad as you think they are. They're not as good as we thought they were last year. They're somewhere in the middle here. And will they be able to turn around? Sure, because they're not as bad as people think. But it's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take them making a lot of right decisions here. Daryl says, do we not think that Bill Callahan had a lot to do with the picking of Jed Wills? Worse would have been the analytical choice. I firmly believe Jim Schwartz wanted Ika. I can't blame Barry for that. Just like I can't blame him for Watson alone. I mean, the problem I have with that is that's basically me. Like, if I were to give Andrew Barry a pass, that's me making a theory up in my head or coming to a conclusion in my head and then giving him a pass based on the conclusion I made up. And whether that's true or not, I will never know. Like, did Bill Callahan pound the table for Jed Wills? I don't know. So it's impossible for me to judge Andrew Barry by trying to factor those things in. All I know is that Andrew Barry turned the card in for Jed Wills. He's going to be criticized for that. All I know is that at the end of the day, Andrew Barry turned in the trade slip for Deshaun Watson. He's going to be criticized for that. I can't delay criticism or give guys breaks off of things that I theorize to be true, I have to judge them based on what they did and what is reasonable to assume, right? And at the end of the day, assuming that Bill Callahan had a lot to do with Jed Wills, it makes sense, but it's not a guarantee that that's how that process always goes, like how it is that the GM always turns the card in for the first pick. So, yeah, I get what you're saying. I think there's some credence to that. But at the end of the day, he turned the card in for Ika. He's going to get criticized for drafting Siaki Ika. He knows this. He turned the card in for Jed Wills. He's going to be criticized for drafting Jed Wills. Thing is that he also turned the card in on a lot of good players. And it's important that those players continue to step up so that these drafts look a lot better going forward. But that's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.